and welcome to Power Reflections, a proud member of the Duff Network, where we reflect on Wildbow's most rowdy work as it releases. I'm Ruben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And we are coming at you live in the Discord. And I've got a slight cold, so apologies. Apologies, everyone. But we are going to be here talking about Wild Abandon 18.2. And then what? The arc's over already? Because we've got an interlude. Yep, 18.1. So presumably the end of the arc, we'll move on to, Wilder Abandon 19 next time.
I don't know why you keep making this joke. It's a dot A.
It's a dot A. It's not. Yeah, I know. I just find it a silly goof. Yeah, as Mirth Strike says in chat, very clever. The arc was abandoned wildly.
That would be funny, especially if
be a great joke.
we time skipped, so as if there was like a whole arc. Like, so arc 19 picks up like 4 days later, and like we're back in the shit with Massa or something.
Good stuff. But yeah, we're with Avery for this chapter. She's back home as some of her family plans to leave amid dangerous circumstances, I suppose.
Yeah, and so basically, like, as we learn throughout this chapter, but we sort of first start to see here, innocents are at risk, which that's crazy, right? Like, I knew Charles was doing a big play, but I really thought this was just going to affect like the magically inclined. I had no idea that this was going to be like innocents, like Avery's relatives need to start being careful. This is proper like pre-seal shit that Charles has done, which I know that's what Verona said he was doing last chapter, but I don't think I really believed how far he was going.
Yeah, I really didn't expect Charles to be to go as far as he's going here, because we learn about this nearby place, this town, Dryden nearby, and like places where innocents are being fucked over to the max, and it's way worse than I previously thought. Like when it was just fucking with practitioners, I was like, you can kind of root for it even if you know in your heart it's wrong. But when it's innocence, you're just like, oh no, Charles, this is way too far.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I kind of respected just the balls to the wall insanity of the plan last week. Like, I think like we talked about it last week. Part of the reason I didn't anticipate this plan is because I didn't think he was thinking this big.
Yeah,
and I was sort of like, this is great, this is cool. And now we're learning he was thinking even bigger than I thought when we got told how big he was thinking. And it's like, oh, actually, this might be a bit too far.
Yeah, too much, Charles.
Yeah,
Tone
this is
down
a bit much, buddy.
Come on. Yeah.
I was also, it made me think, like, we've heard how, like when Kennet started dwindling after Charles made it his throne, innocence and the spirits kind of wrote this off as, oh, the highways having work done or whatever. What is the news saying about Ontario at the moment in the other verse? Like, if we in Australia were turning on the news, is there like giant riots, some sort of natural disaster, a civil war in Ontario? Like,
yeah.
How do you explain this one? Is it a plague? Nobody can move. It's a plague. The COVID has finally reached Ontario in the other verse.
Yeah, I don't know. I hope we find out. I think the times where we get to see the world through the eyes of innocence, like the kind of parent stuff and all those bits and pieces, are always very fun. So yeah, I wanted to call out from this section one of the things that I really liked, which is Avery is clearly having a rough time, and the way that seems to manifest here is that she gives like Verona level of terrible answers to some of these questions from her parents. Like her mum asks, "Is it okay that Uncle Declan is leaving?" And she says, "Oh, I hope so." And her mum's like, "Oh," and it's just a very funny. It's like she's really not good at practitioner doublespeak when she's this tired, and it's quite fun.
Yeah, that's a really like poor bedside manner thing to say.
Yeah, exactly right. It's I think hilarious.
The extension of that as well is like I think why it really stands out is, the world, like, the world's literally falling apart. Avery is exhausted and on the verge of falling apart, and like she's stuck doing all the like family dorky stuff. Like
Yes.
she has that one line where she's like, the one car's leaving and they're all waving, and it's like they do the goofy thing where everyone waves until the car is out of sight, which is just like fucking spoke to my childhood. And like always just seemed so stupid and unnecessary even then, but it's
Yeah.
just one of those things
Yeah.
everyone does.
No, very
Um,
dweeby, but also just like a family thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
like you gotta do it. Um, and then like, but also there's like another moment where she can't sort of say, "Oh, family looks out for each other," because it's going to start her uncle and her dad fighting again. Like, it's like the world's falling apart. You're almost like, guys, this doesn't matter. Like, she has more
Yeah.
important things to do.
Pull it together, folks, for sure.
Kerry's also here in this section and wants to hang out with Avery, and Avery's like, "Yeah, we'll do it later." Um,
Mm.
and then Aunt Clara is like, "No, you can hang out now and do schoolwork." So like, look, obviously Aunt Clara still sucks butts, but at least she's like the one person who's on Kerry's side. I'm continuing to be really worried about Kerry and like how she's
Yeah.
just so desperate for attention and not getting it.
There's a section here where she's repeatedly banging her head against the table. And
Yeah,
I was kind of like, I mean, like, yes, she is obviously a ball of energy normally, but it seemed like an escalation. I'm not sure. Maybe just like because her parents are worrying about the Avery magic shit, like they can't be as, you know,
yeah,
as on top of her, which, is fine and understandable, but also like, it does feel like it's a slight escalation of where Kerry's normally at, and now I don't know. It's
yeah.
slightly worrying.
Because I feel like we've been saying this for weeks. Like it feels like Kerry is about to do a pre-pale Avery, and
Yes, yes,
it's continuing to feel even more like that. Yeah.
yeah. Um, so yeah, Avery heads to the backyard to chat with her parents for a bit before being so tired she forgets how emails work.
Yeah, this is like I remember this was a beat we were hitting in, I think, like arc 15, of like Avery being spread too thin, and she was really sort of struggling to cope with all her balancing like the sheer amount of shit she had to do, and she sort of
Yeah.
got there here. But this chapter really sort of is throwing her back in the deep end. Like she's running on fumes, and there's just an absolute buttload that needs to happen right now. Like it's a tough time to be the sort of arrivals and departures girl, because there's a lot of arrivals and departures happening right now.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, there's like the arrivals and departures stuff is the stuff that Charles is fucking with right here,
But
because
yeah,
there's all this horrible shit going on and they can't, go back to deal with it. So yeah, I was reading through this on my second read through and trying to keep an eye on Avery's mum and see like what tells are there about where Avery's mum is at. Like the question that is kind of slightly raised here is Avery's mum going to try and going to choose to try and forget about magic? And we get the nightmare scene later, which kind of is playing into that fear from Avery a bit. Yeah, I don't know. It's just really interesting to track Avery's mum in this because she's just not handling it very well, right?
no, and like I mean, this is probably my favorite part of the Awarant situation at the moment right now. This like how we're flipping Kelsey and Connor's roles in like Avery's second coming out. Like if you sort of compare this one to when she told them about her sexuality, it was like in that one, Kelsey just kind of nailed it, and Connor was a bit of a bumbling idiot, but like kind of got
Mm,
forced to step up and be better. And now,
yeah.
like we've got the even more intense coming out. I mean, I guess that's up to Avery to make that claim, but this one feels like it's going to have more consequences. And yeah,
It's
Kelsey's
definitely a
really
more novel thing to come out to your parents about, at least. There's less kind of commonly understood ways to deal with it.
Um, yeah, exactly. But it's like, so I was so excited to track this thread of like, yeah, in round two of Avery kind of coming out to her parents, they've completely flipped in how competent they are. Like
Yeah.
it's just such a fun idea.
Well, I really like that. that call out that, like, as you said, Connor had to learn a bit from it, and so he's kind of now more used to dealing with situations that he wasn't expecting, even though he kind of is accepting of them. Whereas Kelsey
Yeah,
kind of had because coming out to a parent is a more common thing than coming out as magical to your parents, I suppose.
yeah,
Kelsey kind of had a very supportive and loving script to fall back on, whereas she's maybe not uh, as able to deal with this one, which is so unexpected to her.
yeah. I had the same thought. Like in a way, like Connor was even further behind the status quo, so he got forced to kind of shape up. Whereas I think like in 2020, the idea of your kid being gay is kind of accepted enough that like
Yeah,
I
where
don't
we
think
are and in Canada and stuff. Yeah.
yeah, like Kelsey didn't really have to like break anything. Like it wasn't really breaking the status quo to accept your gay daughter. Like like obviously a lot of parents still don't do a good job of it, but like I feel like these days enough hopefully do. So it was like in a way Kelsey hasn't actually had this challenge yet. Her like she was just a little bit further along the status quo than Connor was.
There's this really
Um
interesting. I can't quite remember the exact name or terminology for it, so I might butcher the explanation a little bit. But there's this kind of concept in education, in like education theory, where when you're learning something new that changes fundamentally your kind of internal mental model of how something works, that is kind of slightly confronting. And so the process of
yeah.
learning and constantly changing your mental model of things is actually kind of a confronting one, right? And I think that's almost a great analogy for becoming aware, and like that moment where your world kind of shifts and suddenly, as we've seen when people become aware in this story,
Yeah.
your it kind of shakes your worldview a little bit, and you have to kind of categorize things and reevaluate things. And I feel like when Avery came out, that happened to Connor already, and he kind of did that and kind of processed that, and now we're back to him being stable, and then happened
Yeah.
again, and he was maybe able to more deal with it. Whereas when it happened for Kelsey, it's it didn't fundamentally change her worldview so much that it like broke anything. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It was able
And
to slot into her accepted model.
like that's just such a funny situation to have ended up in because Connor was shitter to start with. He's now weirdly in this better position. It's vaguely similar to what we were talking about last week with someone like Easton versus the Kenneteers, where it's like
Mm.
the Kenneteers have gone through more shit, so they've grown more as people and they're stronger.
Yes, yes,
Like this was in the context of whether Easton was a full person at age 14.
yeah.
Um, and like yeah, it's just this weird situation it feels like we've ended up in where like yeah, somehow Connor has just leapfrogged Kelsey because he was shitter to start with, and so
Yeah, I think that's really fun.
TLDR, Declan, Declan will be fine. That's what we're learning here.
Yeah, maybe the way to make Declan a better person is for Avery to come out to him and also come out about the magic stuff to him after a little while.
No, I just
um,
remember like back in the day when Connor was like, "Oh, I was a shitty kid, but I turned out all right, so it doesn't matter if Declan's shitty."
mm,
Maybe he was right.
yeah.
Clearly, there's something to it.
This is obviously the bit where we learn about the extent of the problems Charles is causing, and we get little teasers for the side adventures that we might get in an interlude coming up for the rest of the next few arcs. An evil
Yeah,
call center, the town of Dryden, where
I,
people are being turned into streets and streets are being turned into people.
Dryden is
Um,
my favorite by a mile. So like,
yeah,
because like the idea that people are turned into places and objects are turned into people is just
yeah.
like it breaks your brain. Like you're like, what is that? Like this is some like top tier Magnus Archives kind of ending
Yeah,
shit
you
where
know what it
like
really reminded me of? Do you remember? Have you watched all of Gravity Falls?
yes.
Okay, there's this one bit in Gravity Falls in the Weird Mageddon where
Yeah,
what's his face? Triangle Man, I can't remember his name. Um
yeah, the
shuffles
baddie.
somebody's face, right? Like he shuffles
Yeah,
their facial features around so an eye goes in the position of a mouth or whatever. And it's just like it's like this 3-second thing. But similarly, where Dryden is just kind of briefly mentioned here, but it's so immediately horrifying and like in the truest sense of the word, it like perverts the natural order, right? And yet it just kind of passes by and you're like, no, that's so fucked up. I need to, that's so perverted. You can't just pass on from it.
Yeah. But like my favorite part about this too is that like implements are a good idea because the implement sort of stays connected to the place person when you get
Yeah,
turned. So
yeah.
like I want to read the short story about the people who go fix this and like their implements save the day and their implements have their hero moment. Like that's such a fun
Yes.
story.
Yeah,
Like,
the implement is now in charge and the
yeah, like
practitioner is the implement.
the wand that, comes from that house down the road because their practitioner got turned. Like it's
Well,
just
Elliot, who if implements are good for dealing with Dryden, theoretically, the person with the most implements would be the best to deal with Dryden and should be sent to deal with it. And so we might get an interlude where Musser goes to deal with Dryden and has to learn what it's like being on the other side when his implements all become the people, which would be
oh,
so fucking funny.
it would be. But yeah, like Dryden has become my own answer to like our discussion question. Like I want to see the Dryden story. I think it's just such a like this reverse Alcazar situation is just such a fun idea
Yeah.
to
Um,
fundamentally flip reality like that. I love it.
Yeah. So there's others. There's an evil scalpel. There's 30
Yeah.
cannibal boogeymen. Like it's all horrific stuff, and it's all the kind of stuff where like I genuinely don't know if we're going to see more details on any of them, but it's such great like that classic Wildbow world building of like all of these
Mm.
things could be their own thing. You know, they're all effectively like on the same level as the Hungry Quiet in terms of horrifying.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously we'll get to the boogeymen later. So the other thing that comes up here that is worth pointing out, I just noticed we didn't actually write it down in our notes, but it seems like Thunder Bay is actually kind of safe. Like
Yes,
I think last
from what we
week,
can tell.
yeah, last week I very much made the assumption that Charles would be more indiscriminate and Thunder Bay was going to be completely fucked. But uh, Avery definitely seems to be working off the assumption from people that like it's more or less okay, which is
Yeah, presumably
interesting.
because an other's already in charge there. Like it's kind of, there's
Well,
no need to unseat
yeah.
them, I suppose.
Or yeah, is it an other, or is it more that it's like actually a valid lordship? Although I don't think Charles would give a fuck. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, have
It
we
just
heard
jumped out to
about
me.
Toronto, which is already another pre-existing lordship? I don't
Yeah,
know.
but then that one was a Musser one now because he took it. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, like I'm wondering exactly what his motivation for leaving it alone was. Part of it, I guess, this is further down in the notes, but obviously there's a whole thing about he's going to leave the Kenneteers alone. Is it literally the fact that Avery's there was a factor? Like,
Yeah, maybe.
I guess we'll see. Yeah, I don't know. I'm always a little bummed that we're not going to enter Nightmare Apocalypse Thunder Bay. I think that would have been a really fun plot thread.
No, I'm glad we don't. I can't handle it. I don't think I could handle
In a world where Janine is on top.
it. So yeah, Jasmine and Lucy drop by, and Avery's still kind of struggling to reply to all these emails.
Yeah. And basically, this is where the parents start to really focus in on how they think the girls are like getting a bit desensitized. I mean, Avery argues that it's not desensitization; she's just not as affected by it anymore, which feels to me like that's just another way of saying you've become desensitized to it. Um,
Yeah, I think so.
but like, I think like militarized is the other thing. Like, this is the thing that Jasmine I think more hones in on is that like she's worried Lucy has been wrapped up in this sort of war, and I guess spoiler alert. I think like this will probably be our next discussion question because we've been talking about it a lot offline as well. Just like I find this so fascinating. This idea of as a parent, how do you juggle the like Jasmine wants to protect Lucy is what she keeps saying, but as people in our discussion question last week were talking about, like that was already kind of failing. Like there's a certain point where protecting someone moves to like sheltering them and leaving them unprepared to face the world.
Mm.
And so like as a parent, like especially like with a black child like Lucy, at what like how do you balance preparing them for the world while also like not turning them into 12-year-old soldiers. like
Yeah, I'm easily impressed. In chat points out Nora's mum, and I think that's also a really
yes,
interesting kind
because
of
she's the other
example
end.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, like this is just the thing that's really been sitting in my head all week, and that I've been talking about the most is I love this conundrum for the parents of you want to protect your kids, but you can't shelter them. You need to prepare them for the world,
yeah,
and where their awakening sits along this, because as people pointed out last week, the Kennedys were chosen because they were already falling through the cracks. Like Lucy was angry and borderline resentful when we started. Avery fucking was borderline lost, not
yeah,
long before the story. Like things weren't going well, and so the idea that the parents want to protect them now, it's a bit like, well, that wasn't working to start with.
yeah, yeah. It's a really good point.
Like I find this idea, yeah, how you balance that fascinating, and I can't wait to see how the awareness go with it.
Yeah. Speaking of protecting the kids, um, Charles also seems to be keeping to his deal of keeping the Kennedys safe. Or like, this is the interesting thing. So there's this quote where Nicolette has read that the travel for the Kennedys is going to be safe, but not for Mus's allies. And like, this means seemingly that Charles has got these monstrous others to agree to lay off the Kennedys and Kennet, right? Um,
Yeah.
why? Like, why? It's great. Thanks, Charles. But is he being nice? Like, is he being nice here? Like, I'm
Yeah,
trying to. I was looking through like oaths that he's made to see if he has to protect them, and it doesn't seem like he has to, right?
no, I went and looked up the truce they made at the start of Arc 16
Mm,
to verify, and the terms of that truce were either 6 months or until Musa takes notice of Kennet.
yeah.
I feel like we can pretty safely conclude that Musa has in fact noticed Kennet.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I agree, unless I've forgotten another oath that Charles made. I don't think he's like legally obligated to be protecting the people of Kennet. I think like arguably he does kind of have to protect Kennet because it's his seat.
Yes. It's his seat of power, so he does have to protect Kennet as a place, but not.
Yeah.
The Kennedys traveling outside of Kennet presumably would be something that he
No.
would want to restrict so that they can't,
Well, I think
scheme against him
yeah.
outside.
I mean, I do think this is Charles. Like we've seen Charles, like when Lucy was going to shoot him in Arc 13, and Charles is very much like, I don't want her to live with this. Like I think Charles genuinely
Mm,
does care for the Kenneteers, and
yeah.
like the only time he's really against them is when they're trying to stop him. Like he'll choose his cause over them, but I think I until we have a reason to suspect otherwise, I'm going to go with the theory that yeah, he just genuinely
He's just as being nice to them.
yeah, like this is just like he doesn't hate the Kennedys. In fact, I think he does. The culprits very much, I think, don't disagree with Kennet. They just thought it was too slow. But like, I could see Charles wanting Kennet to be strong once he runs out of power because he wants better things to be built from the ashes he's creating, and like Kennet is the best solution for that. So like
Mm,
genuinely in his sick and twisted world, like he might see this as him helping to empower Kennet, and like I think Charles thinks he's more on their side than Kennet does.
mm.
So I don't know. We'll
Yeah.
see. I feel like I'm slotting back into my time honored role of Charles apologist.
No, I think you're right. I do think you're right. He is just choosing to be nice to them because I think maybe in some way he sees them as another facet of a system that like he sees them as being taken advantage of by the current system, right? Which is obviously his
Yeah.
whole deal.
And also like I think he does like back in their awakening ritual, we saw that he didn't want them to awaken. I feel like there is a
Yeah.
sense of he was there. Even though like he's not obligated to, I think he feels a sense of responsibility and like guardianship over the Kenneteers. Like I think very specifically, it's the three of them that he probably feels that he needs to protect to some extent.
Yeah, yeah, and it is obviously hypocritical. Like he is now a judge in a position of power, and almost certainly has caused the death of at least some children that are
Yeah, exactly.
more
Yeah,
and literal innocence, right? So like, he's clearly being hypocritical about it. But I think
yeah.
you're right.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, that's our Charles.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, the Kenneteers meet with Mus's people and aim to help them as much as they can, despite getting really no love in return.
Yeah, this is such a mess. This because it's like there's so much shit to do. We've got 3 days till Musa is back. In theory, like there's so much to do, and so much of the Kenneteers' time and just Canada as a whole is going to be eaten up by these big 60 loser babies.
Yeah.
Like, we've got 60 fucking whiners left in town, and it's very understandable why they're upset. But yeah.
Yeah. It's a bit of a frustrating scene, isn't it? Because the Kenneteers are genuinely trying to help here. And we get quotes like this where a woman says, "Why did you stand in our way? If you just let this pass without contest, we could have been on our way back and we could have been ready days ago." And that's just like, yowza. Like, Musa is so clearly at fault here, and this woman is just refusing to see that. I don't know.
Well, I mean, honestly, you can gainsay the shit out of her for that because Charles did this. The Kenneteers and Kenneth Found had no impact on Charles and his plan. Like
Yes.
he did this because Musa was trying to claim Kenneth. That's why he
Yes.
hit go. And also, so yeah, they wouldn't have had time to be ready days ago because,
Nope.
like, what is she talking about? Like, it's
Yeah, it
just
makes no sense.
you'd just be dead. Like,
Yeah.
that's where you'd be.
And I don't want to be too harsh on them. Like, this woman clearly is struggling to process the
No,
horrific,
exactly. Yeah.
effectively a terrorist attack, right? Like a major attack.
Or a violent revolution. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's rough. It's a lot of death and destruction, and obviously it's a big one to process. But even so, come on, you're the aggressor here, lady.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like that, Lucy's still trying to argue with them, and they just can't see that. Like Lucy, she has that moment where she's like arguing with some of the Sonjitos, and they're like, "You killed Milo," and she's like, "Fuck, what was I meant to do? Please
Yeah, yeah,
suggest to me how else that could have gone. It was either me or him. He made it that way. Like that
yeah.
was
He decided to try and kill me. He was a
yeah."
murderer. What do
And
you
like
want me to do?
this is that trope that always drives me nuts. Like I remember even as a kid getting so annoyed when like it's always the mafia in movies. It's like the mafia tries to kill someone, and then that person kills the mafia, and then the mafia's like, "We've got to kill them." Like John Wick did it as well. Like,
Mm,
you killed my son. It's like he started it. Like I don't like. I always hate this hypocritical. Like you killed Milo, and it's like, well, he was trying to kill me. Like what gives him the right to do that, but I'm not allowed to defend myself? And like
yeah, exactly. Nothing.
it,
It's hypocrisy is the answer.
yeah, and I find it like so frustrating, but also in this segment, I'm like trying to give them a bit of leeway because these guys are like, this is a understandably bad situation that they've
Yes,
found themselves
yes.
in, and I can see why they're not in a position to self-reflect right now on how it's their own fucking fault for being
Mm.
here.
Yep.
Like this is the point where Charles even starts. Like Charles's plan, these kids were being forced to eat their parents or something by the boogeyman, and it's a bit like,
Mm.
okay, like I'm starting to be on the practitioner's side over Charles right now. Like that's truly horrifying. Charles, chill the fuck out.
Yep.
Like
Good stuff.
it's misdirected but very valid anger that all these people are feeling right now, and they're still trapped
Yeah.
in a foreign place that's been hostile to them. They can't get out because it's even more hostile outside. Like, yeah, just
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the Legendre start to reveal more terrible things that are loose, and it basically just gets worse and worse and worse here.
The bit with the legendaries though was just like it was so funny because this guy's like, oh, this is starting to feel like a thing of our failures, and this the guy's like, yeah, it is, and he's like, don't, no, sorry,
Yeah.
you don't get to pin this on the legendaries. Like we've been
Yeah.
understaffed, underfunded. Like it was just the biggest fucking "I told you so" moment from the legendaries.
Yes, and it's so good, and it's a perfect payoff to well, Millie's interlude specifically, right? Like
Yeah,
because it points out quite neatly that Charles was only able to do this it was made much worse here by practitioners stopping caring about the actual thing that they're meant to be doing, which is
Yes.
defeating the biggest monsters, right? Like protecting the
Yeah.
innocents
Well,
from monsters.
because we talked about this in the Legendary interlude. It's like they feel like the only family that's doing what practitioners were designed to do. This is why the seal was created. It was so
Yes.
practitioners could do this job that the Legendaries do.
Yeah. And it's perfect because it's like, it feels like this very capitalist metaphor of
Oh yeah.
society has trying to, min max their expenditure on, you know uh on protecting us from the biggest monsters, so that we don't have to spend any additional power, any smidge of power more than we absolutely have to. And of course that means that we're completely under prepared for anything that's even slightly unexpected, not to
Yeah.
mention something like this.
Because like the Legendaries obviously suck. Their opinions on goblins suck. But also that's where they make their money, and it's a bit like they've been standing here crying out like we are underfunded. Things will go wrong if something bad happens to us, and now it's gone wrong, and everyone's like, "Oh, you didn't do your job," and it's like, the fuck were we meant to do? We told
Yeah,
you this was going to happen. Like it's so, yeah, it's such a good moment because even though it's coming from the Legendaries, you're just like, fucking, you reap what you sow, guys.
100%, and it's so satisfying.
Um, But yeah, and so we get more details here on like a bunch of the others that will let loose. And my favorite one, to replace Dryden, I guess, is this family who just appear human. Like they don't read as other, but like people
Oh
go into
yeah,
their house
this is
and
a
they come
funny
out
one.
as just like a different self, but still human, just a fundamentally different self. Like, and it's so like
Yep.
that's such in like uncanny valley levels of horror where it's just like this is everything looks fine, but like Stepford Wives, like it's just off.
Yeah.
Like it's
And the way that this group took over is just, now the Lord lives with them, and it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, whoa, fuck.
Like and it ties so beautifully into like a lot of the other versus human boundary stuff that's been the talk of the fandom the last few weeks, like
Yes,
mostly
yes.
led by Megafire, obviously. But it's just like they're so subtly horrifying, these ones. Like, 30 boogeymen forcing kids to eat their parents is obviously horrifying, but there's something more unsettling about just a family who seems fine. But they're obviously
Yeah.
not, but they're fine.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, this continues to be a very frustrating conversation after we learn about some of these horrifying others. Like, the assembled group just refused to believe that the Kennetiers aren't as shitty as they are, so they refuse to
Yeah.
play along, and it just goes around in circles and then devolves.
Yeah, it's the exact opposite of what we're about to see in Kenneth Found next chapter. Like, everyone just sort of refuses to trust everyone because they assume everyone else wants to drag them down to raise themselves up.
Yeah,
Because this is the game Massa has created. Well, actually, no, he didn't create it. He just exploited it. Um,
yeah.
yeah. It's just like, yeah, they just literally can't fathom that Kenneth literally just wants to help them and get them somewhere safe that's not here because it's fucking crowded. Like, their goals are so aligned and they just can't let themselves see it.
Yeah, I know. It's very frustrating. So yeah, things don't really go the Kennetiers' way. America and some other dissenters still plan to fight them, and uh, when Avery gets home, her family has left. Or have they?
And we'll talk about that fool me 100 times, shame on you thing in a second. But like, yeah, so this whole thing with America is like, America, I really want to like you. You seem like you're really cool when you're not just being an absolute fuckwit. And like, she's leading like this contingent that includes like Eastern and shit. And it's just, oh, like, she's just such a pain in the ass. And we already start to see the effects of this like dissident young war mage group next chapter. But it's like, what a fucking, yeah.
No, Elliot. That would be a problem, but luckily, practitioners aren't this frustrating. It was all just part of the nightmare. See, not just the bit where Avery gets home is a nightmare. This whole meeting with the council was a nightmare. And actually, what really happened was that conversation went really well, and now the practitioners are friendly.
No, Ruben, you're not thinking big enough. The whole story has been a dream.
Oh yeah, oh
Remember
yeah.
Far Cry? The end of the story is that
Yep,
Cherry Pop
yep.
wakes up and it was all a dream.
But yeah, this nightmare fake out got me so much. Like
Yes.
earlier, I was rereading the conversation with Avery's parents, and I forgot that this thing that happens later isn't real because of how much it got me.
Yeah, it was like it really wasn't until Lucy like showed up. Like, it was like as Lucy showed up, I was having them. I was like, "Oh, this is a fucking dream, isn't it?" Like,
Yep.
and I think this one works. You know, as I said, for the 100th fucking time, Walbo's getting us with the same goddamn bit. Um, it works because this one's so mellow and like very subtly horrifying for Avery. Like, you know, so many of the
Yeah.
other ones, it's been like Lucy's brother dies, or like, you know, like just this really hard hitting, oh, this is such a nightmare. This one is just, I mean, you know, Avery has sort of come out to her parents again, and Kelsey is not coping with it and needs
Yeah.
time apart from her, which is the most like heartbreaking response to a pseudo coming out. Um, it's so believable and so subtle, and like, yeah, it just guts you.
Yeah, but luckily, Avery wakes up. She's still tired, of course, but Snowdrop refuses to let her do anything until she gets a bit of nourishment by having a chat with her girlfriend, and it's so nice.
Yeah, Snowdrop for fucking president of the world.
Yeah,
Like, what a good bean.
yeah, it really helps round out this chapter, which has just been pure frustration and us
Yes.
seeing Avery beat down. But yeah, it's nice. It's lovely. Nora's wonderful. Thumbs up. Great stuff.
Yeah, I love the moment where like Avery falls asleep and then she wakes up and Nora's just like left the phone call running so that they can just like be closer even though they're apart. It's just so fucking cute.
Yeah,
Um
it's really good.
yeah.
It's great
Oh
stuff.
but okay, so to move back to the horrifying section, can we talk about how
Yeah,
Nora's
great.
mum makes her gelatin or meat inside gelatin? Like
Yeah, which I think is confirmation that those 30 cannibal boogeymen have actually infiltrated Thunder Bay, right?
I
Because
didn't
only
know
they
this was
would
a
cook
thing.
something so gross.
I had to Google this because I didn't realize this is horrifying. Do people really do this?
What is this? Sorry, let me look this up. What is this? Is it like meat in gelatin?
Yeah.
Uh,
Right? Yeah, that is exactly the
what?
response I had. I Googled, like, as I was reading this, I Googled a picture and I was like, the
The
fuck are we
fuck
doing,
is this
gang?
shit? It's like a almost like a meat flan.
I have to assume that it, like, preserves things somehow. Like, this feels like one of those things that humanity invented
Oh
because it
yeah,
would
yeah,
keep the
yeah.
meat, like, good for a couple of extra
Yeah,
days or
you
something.
cook this at the start of the month and then you can eat it for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, but it's just like, I just looked at it and I was like, come on, guys, it's 2020. We don't have to do this anymore.
Yeah, and shouldn't. It's good, gross. Yowza.
Yeah, oh god, people are posting pictures in our chat. Shrimp? Oh, that's just and like because it's gelatin, right? Which isn't jelly. But I've never had not j- like sweet jelly, and the idea of beef sitting in
Yes.
jelly just makes me want to vom. Like that's so bad.
I mean, it's effectively like cat food or dog food, right?
Yeah. This is fucking brown milk tier
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
And this will not be appearing at all packed up. I'm drawing that line right now. I'll eat dog. I'll eat the brown milk again. I won't have this.
Anyway, um, what were we
Yeah.
what were we talking about?
I mean, this is effectively the end of the chapter, and I just like I guess what really jumped out to me reading this is like how it compares to like arc 14 in the sense that like arc 14 was, you know, after our big loss, and the big thing at the end of arc 14 was Lucy being like, we have to figure out how to build ourselves up so we can keep fighting and blah blah blah. And I feel like this chapter makes a pretty good case that they've done that for themselves, because this is like this chapter opens with Avery just being overwhelmed, running on fumes. They've effectively, I mean, they haven't quite lost like they did in Arc 13, but I wouldn't
Mm,
call Arc 17 a win.
mm.
Um, and the first half of this chapter is really just grinding you down with like Avery's in a bad spot, she's overwhelmed, blah blah, but like she has other people she's able to lean on. Snowdrop fucking saves the day. It's this real sense of like uh, they've kind of been hit really hard in arc 17, but this chapter feels like it just tells you they're not as set up, like they're not drowning like they were at arc 14.
Yeah, yeah. It feels like then, even though they're obviously going through a really rough time, it feels like this ending is saying to us they've got better support networks. They know themselves better. They can handle this better.
Yeah, although we haven't had a Verona chapter yet, so let's not lay that down as a universal law for the Kenneteers.
Yeah,
Because
true.
if there's one person who has not quite achieved that in a way, I'd say as a universal success, it's going to be Ronnie.
Yeah, we'll see, I suppose. We get a brief picture of Rona next chapter in Wild Abandon 18.a, where we go from Kennet Found to the Kennet Undercity to the Kennet. Starting with a mote of a lost, miscellaneous forgotten ideas that drift around until they glom together and are pulled into Kennet Found by Miss, being given form as Luna Hair. She's back.
I love as well the note that these aren't just lost things; these are lost things within the lost thing. Like this is
Yes.
the background set dressing of a path that even the finders aren't going to notice. It's lost by lost standards, and
Yeah.
yet has turned into already a top tier fan favorite character. And I'm like, this is what Avery was talking to the Page of Suns about at Arc 17. She was like, the thing about the paths to her was that you can go out and find these things that are forgotten and aren't considered useful and maybe find a use for them. And this is Miss really delivering on that idea with taking bottom tier path scraps and turning them into something fantastic.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I love it. It's very fun. And the perspective of it in this kind of early part is really fun as well. And then we see like Mrs. Ascension from this kind of alien perspective, and we see
Yeah.
Miss again later from Luna's perspective, and it's just really fun seeing her as, as a goddess effectively.
Yeah, and I think this is like a cool perspective because I think like a lot of people, including myself, were predicting like a Miss interlude as she fell to like explain Found Kennet to us in Arc 17.
Mm.
Obviously, that's not how it went. And I think reading this from Luna's perspective, I see why this is a better way to do that because there's so much going on here. And I think Miss's perspective would have had this really weird high level thing where we wouldn't have quite understood what it looks like in practice because like you just can't capture that level of consciousness. And so it's almost more fun to see what the journey of one scrap looks like as a kind of a textbook example of what this is going to be and what everything in Found Kennet is.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's really fun. It's just a lot of really fun stuff in this early part.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to pull out like because there's a bit of fun world building here. Like I don't think we get anything particularly new except the idea that there's this electro radio ether slowly taking over
Mm.
the part of the ruins that handles like memory and the dead. And I was like, oh, like how our phones are making it all so we have shittier memories because we rely on our phones to like schedule things for us and all that.
Yes, and
Like,
like, digital memories of people kind of
yeah,
persisting and all these weird things that are starting to
like
happen.
yeah, it was one of those things where you sort of read it and you're like, oh, of course, a technomantic realm is starting to encroach on that part of the ruins. Like it's one of those little blink and you'll miss it world building lines while Bo's snuck in that you're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Uh,
it's good stuff.
we also and thank you to Wildbow for this because I'm so sick of having this discussion with people. We get a hard confirmation that Miss is bound to the seal. There were I've still seen people before this chapter arguing that the only person who's told us she's bound to the seal is her, and she might not be. We can finally close the door on that nonsense. So thank you.
Yep. Thumbs up, Wildbow.
Um, but yeah, oh, and like getting into like the rest of Found Kennet. Like I love as the houses start to form. There's this real sense of it has to be wacky and weird. Um, and so like Luna lives by herself. There's another house with 30 kids. Like there's the couple that don't actually work. Like I just love it's like all like it's like Miss was just like, what are all the ways I can challenge the traditional nuclear family?
Mm, yeah, yeah, it's true, and I love that part of the whole theme of this part of this chapter and this chapter as a whole is like how normal all of this stuff is. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like
Well,
to the people
by
that live in
yeah,
it, it's just normal life, and it's great.
yeah.
Um,
I agree, and but like I love this is sort of our first glimpse at Kenneth Found from a foundling's perspective, and it's very much like she thinks of it as this is meant to be wacky, this is meant to not be the system, and that's so fun because Kenneth below was like the opposite of societal norms in
mm,
that everything was it was all the repressed stuff, it was all the violence and all that, whereas like Kenneth Found is coming at it from this perspective of how could we just intentionally throw it on its head in a wacky way.
yep. Very fun. Uh, so yeah, we see more of Luna's life as she goes about her duties, delivering writs and dealing with annoying practitioners with aplomb. Well done, Luna.
Yeah, this first guy she comes across is just like Karening out at the place where Miss is working. Like I just love how this guy is just so livid. Like honestly, I think understandably mad that they're like, you have to do a 3-day course. Like if I ended up here and they're like, you have to do a 3-day course on civility, I'd be like, you fucking what? like that
It's
is
ridiculous. I love it.
that that is very. I love how all of the three Kennets are dystopian in their own way, and this one is bureaucracy.
It's so fucking satisfying, though.
Especially because it's all the violent practitioners who are ending up here. Like it's the people who do what Anthem did, where they just solve everything with violence. And Kenneth Found is like, no, 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 3-day course for you, bud.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, good stuff.
But yeah, I mean the other thing here, like as we see Luna get to this place, like Walbo's putting so much effort here into really establishing Kenneth Found as like just this kind of big co-op. Like everything is so the first thing we see Luna do when she leaves her house is take the excess milk she's been given and just like give it to her neighbors because there's 30 kids there, they need more milk. Like it's this real I don't know, somebody who's more learned than myself might have a term for like the kind of politics that runs this place, but it's just so like I mean, it's a place that runs on the don't be a wang bag philosophy that Snowdrop was outlining for us. Like it's just
Mm,
everyone focuses on like cooperation and community and like just not being a dick.
yeah, that's enough of a rule to make the place cool.
And they have like the memos for helping someone out is like a tangible currency here. Like being a good citizen is kind of rewarded in a bit of a codified way.
Mm,
Like yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um,
Like it's got very like UBI vibes as well, where like there is an incentive to work and to make money, but it's not like that's not what defines your life, right? Like whereas in so much of the world, like what job you do, what your career is sort of one of the primary facts about you. Whereas here, it's like, look, just live your life, and if that takes the form of like working on something and getting a job, then like great. Otherwise, all right. Like yeah, this is the UBI based world that I want to see.
yeah, for sure. Um, I want to call out this bit where the practitioner yells at Luna that she's just a prop and is soulless, pointless, and unimportant, which I think is so telling the words that he uses. Um, but I really just am like curious, like, is it just the Foundlings? Is this his thought around others in general? Because like thinking about it, one of the things that I think the chapter is saying here is Luna is effectively like a 2-day old baby at this point, right? So
Yeah,
I think she's doing pretty well given that context.
yeah. And the other ironic thing about this is, so what we heard from like I think it was Easton's interlude is that yeah, they do start off kind of as blank slates that get
Yes.
filled in later. The big thing that fills them in is interactions with other people. So him yelling at them that they're like soulless or whatever is helping to find them because he's interacting with them and giving them
Yeah.
attentions.
Yeah.
So it's like this ultimate irony that he's yelling this at them because he's undoing that very thing by engaging with them. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, like there's some truth to that, but it's just completely overlooking. Yeah, I mean their potential. Like this is the classic lost problem.
Yeah. It is. Uh, it's just a practitioner being a total dweeb.
Yeah, and I mean I love like this is sort of the area where Luna starts to think like like the laws here are great because they stop him from getting violent, and it's like they're here to because our laws here are sort of so open and free. It makes like civic responsibility more important, and we need to protect the weakest and most valuable people around here.
Mm.
And it like I guess I can like I would move to Kennet Found, right? I consider it to be a utopia already, like from what we've seen. But I like part of me wonders like the concern with something like this is as you scale it up, like if you want this to spread, what does that look like? Like
Mm.
how do you do we just have all little small pocket towns everywhere and no big government, or like what? Like literally, my only problem with Kennet Found is that it can't spread. I don't think like, it doesn't scale.
Yeah. I love Kennet Found. It's such an interesting place. I'm excited that we get to see more of it.
Yeah, but like, yeah, I don't know. I wonder. This is a great step in Mrs. Plan, but okay, like, what does the
Mm.
next stage look like? Where does something like do we want copycats? And then if so, like, how do you stop? Because the problem
Mm.
with something like this is when you rely on foundlings like this, all you need is one shitty foundling or someone who's a founder. So and then
Yes.
someone who is a founder who gets shit, and it like hurts a lot of people. So like, I mean, this is the problem with government, right? Is like you either codify all the rules to the point where people can game them, or you leave it open, in which case people will abuse it. Like you don't.
Yeah. I don't think. I think the thing to be replicated is the idea, right, of building collaborative systems between humans and others, and it doesn't have to be a found Dryden or a found Thunder Bay, dependent on the others that are there, as long as they're kind of reaching an equilibrium with each other. They probably don't even need to create additional realms. It's just that equilibrium that is the goal.
Yeah, but you've got to make everyone unlearn to be like the practitioners we were talking about last chapter, where they see everyone out to get them. Like people are so worried they're under attack that they're not. Like the beauty of Can It Found is that everyone there was created to value civic responsibility and to just want to be communal. Like I don't know how you teach that to everyone else in the world. Like
Maybe big dangerous others that force you to rally together is a
I'm
decent idea. I don't know.
I, I mean, you'd think so, but like, it's not working so far. And I mean, even the original Kennet, right, got fucked over by Charles and Marcy. Like, even when you
Yes.
get
Yes.
the best others you can to form a little community, the exact undermining shit happens in the original Kennet. So I don't know. I love Kennet Found. I would move there, but like, my question looking at it is just okay. But what can we do with this aside from have one safe space for a place like Kennet?
Mm,
Like, I'm like, I love this. I want more. How do we do that?
yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. That's a Wild Bow's question to figure out, I think.
Yeah, we'll get the answer by the end of Pale on how to fix the world.
Yeah. I really love this moment where, as the DMV lady, as I'll refer to her, is speaking to this practitioner, we get Luna Hair nodded to herself, all very sensible. Fuck this area. Luna stopped nodding to herself, a bit affronted. It's like, I love how the foundlings just think, yeah, this is all normal and standard, and if anyone doesn't think so, well, they're weird.
Yeah, it
It's
ties into
delightful.
that idea. Like I used to love when Kennet below people would be like, oh, Kennet above is a dystopia, because they'd see like Verona's homework assignment, or they'd like find out school starts at 7:30, and they'd be like, Jesus Christ, that place sounds terrible.
Mm.
Um, and like this is now the Kennet Found variant on that, where like there's just all these convoluted rules that just involve don't be a dick, and Luna's like, yeah, this makes sense. And when somebody challenges it, it's like, what are you talking about? Like, it's that like external view to like systems. Like, people have talked about this on our Discord in terms of like, neurodivergent people. Like, when you don't sort of, if you're neurodivergent, sometimes like a lot of just neurotypical sort of habits and ways of interacting with people are completely alien, and they just don't make sense. And it's so fun seeing the way this story is like playing with that sort of vibe. Like, we see these alien places and they just are bizarre to us, whereas to the people from those places, it's like, yeah, that's just how it works. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the mix of the pure whimsy with the complete inability to recognize this is not normal is very fun.
Yeah, like, like, these are the war mages. Like, they're going to go to Kennet below, and the Kennet below people will be like, oh, you just need to kill enough people to get to the front of the line. It's all very sensible. And these war mages are going to be like, yep. Like, what fucks you up in this new triad of Kennets is your inability to like go with the flow and respect other people's ways of doing things.
Mm.
Like, it comes back to I remember talking about this a lot back in like Arc 6. Like, the point of Pale, we thought back then, wasn't that like teamwork meant everyone was the same. It was that you're able to work with people who are different. And that's what this new triad of Kennets is. Like, they're all very different places, but they're willing to work with each other and understand each other. And that's not what the practitioners are doing.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Good stuff. So yeah, Luna goes to visit her goddess and is quickly given a special assignment from Miss.
Yeah. And like, so like the visuals of Mrs. I mean, I want to call it a throne room, but that's not what it is. It's this fucking chaotic post office of like,
yeah,
like papers
it is a post
swarming
office.
around.
You're right. That's definitely the vibe.
It reminds me of the post office from The Wind Waker, which is a weird reference, but like, just there's like giant swarm of letters, and you have to like pick them out and throw them in the right slot. It's like representative of Mrs. Mind right now as the founder of just like, there's just so much shit to do, and she's sitting up here being a control freak. I love her passive aggressive, or not so passive aggressive, assistance.
Yeah, I was thinking of the post office from, I think, Men in Black 2. with all the aliens managing the post. Good stuff.
I haven't seen that one.
Oh, well, more fool you, I guess.
But yeah, no, it's just it's such a fun visual of like her sitting here just with this swarm around her.
Wait, have you seen any of the Men in Black films? Sorry,
I think
just got to take a break.
I think I saw the original as a kid. Does it have a cockroach in it, or a bunch of cockroaches?
Yes. Yeah. Vincent D'Onofrio plays a cockroach monster. It's good stuff.
Wait, that's the guy from Daredevil?
That is the guy from Daredevil.
Cool.
Interesting. Just going to take note of this for a later high ground suggestion. Men in Black. Elliot hasn't seen films?
I'm still annoyed. I know we say this every time either franchise comes up. I want that 22 Jump Street crossover Men in Black movie. Why did they cancel that?
It was because of the Sony leaks. Do you remember the Sony email leaks? I think that was part of the reason for cancelling it, because
but that's stupid,
and everyone was really excited about it. So I guess they thought, never mind.
That's the wildest thing. Is this leaked? And everyone was like, "That sounds like the coolest thing ever." And it's like, "Well, now we're not going to do it." And it's like, "What are you talking?"
That'll show the hackers.
Like, it's the worst business ever. That's bad business. Yeah. And so I do want to call out, because we're getting comments with regards to my comments about like the neurodiversity stuff here, and honestly, like, that is sort of actually what I meant. I think I just phrased it poorly, but like, yeah, the idea is that like society is kind of built around the idea that there's these norms and everyone's just meant to do them without question, and it's often neurodiverse people who sort of come in and are like, why are we doing it like this makes no sense. And I
Mm,
love that all three Kennets kind of have a different set of rules that highlight this to everyone.
mm, mm.
Like each one I think is gonna, I don't think there's going to be a person who will look at all three of these realms and say, "Oh, yes, that makes sense." Like, you're going to have at least one where you're like, "What is this hellscape?" And I love that because it's this trio where it's like that for at least everyone. Everyone has to confront the fact that on at least one of them that it's just insanity. Like, we haven't seen Lucy and Kenneth found yet. I think if Lucy got stuck in Kenneth found, she'd pop her lid very quickly. Like,
Mm. Yes, true. It's the exact kind of bureaucracy she would hate.
yeah, exactly. But it's not going to be a problem for her because Lucy's not a dick, so she won't end up in trouble there. But if Lucy got Ritz, she'd be responding in a very similar way to a lot of these Kennet others. Sorry, the Kennet, the invading practitioners.
Mm. Yeah. um, I love this comment to get back to the Mrs. Assistants that are passive aggressive towards her. Um, Zachary points out Miss probably intentionally made anti yes men, which I just think is a great point, and definitely something that Miss would do because she clearly is very worried about being like a. Well, yeah, she says here, I didn't make you happy by default or overly helpful by default. I would understand if you felt obligated with me being your creator. Like she's very compassionately checking that she's not forcing anyone as a goddess to do anything they don't want to do, right?
Yeah,
It's great.
it,
It's great
uh,
stuff.
and like again, I love her shitty little assistants, her no men who are like, oh, she does this a lot. She asks everyone this. Like they got this real vibe of, Miss, can you stop checking everyone's okay? We've got shit that needs to get done. But it's so important. You're right that she does this. Like as the founder, it's like she doesn't want to be a practitioner who's created a bunch of others that are forced to do what she says. She tried to create individuals, and she's desperately trying to make sure that she's not like inadvertently coercing them into doing her will.
Mm.
Um, I mean, honestly, it's one of the things Miss used to talk about was like she couldn't relate to a lot of stuff because she hadn't had kids, right? I think it was when Lucy really needed to go see her mum after the Phinia trial, and Miss was like, "Sorry, a lot of us forget this because we don't have parents, we can't have kids. We forget that that's how humans work."
Mm.
I think Miss kind of gets it now, probably because, like, what's the difference? Well, this chapter directly raises the idea of what's the difference between a kid being born and a foundling being made.
Yes.
Like Miss is all of their moms, and I think this is going to be a really interesting angle to when Jazz finally comes to get it found to yell at Miss. Um, Miss can actually probably better relate to Jasmine now than she could have before the founding because
Mm.
she's kind of got kids now. Like it's different, but not that different. Like I'll be very surprised if Miss doesn't mention her foundlings as a comparison to Lucy when they finally have that convo.
Yeah, no, I think so for sure. Yeah, I really think it's a great marker of how much Miss has grown from the Kennetiers, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, because she did that kind of heartlessly, and there's been a lot of discussion in the story about whether she crossed lines doing that. And I just think it's so fascinating that now she's about to get called out on it by Jazz. She's actually a mum herself. That's such a fun idea.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Unfortunately, this chapter quickly takes a turn for the worst when Miss gives messages to Luna Hare and says that there are messages for the Vice Principal, Stu Mullen, and the Bitter Street Witch, hinting that we came ever so close to a Stu Mullen interlude before Wildbow swerved us at the last second and gave us Bitter Street Witch instead, which is terrible, and I think we should mutiny.
I think, Ruben, that if you got a Stu Mullen interlude, it would be like Icarus flying too close to the sun.
Mm,
You'd burn out in the pure brilliance of your Stu Mullen interlude.
perhaps.
Oh, I love Stu. Him and his dumb himbo energy. He's so good.
He's very fun.
Because we get like the Bittersweet Witches brothers make an appearance, and they're kind of
Yes.
himbo-y, but they're not
Yes,
Stu
for
Mullen.
sure. They're little mini Stu Mullins. But yeah, so Luna heads to Verona's domain and has a bit of a nice chat with her. And this is just a bit of fun. This is just kind of
Yeah.
a fun conversation, right?
I mean, just even before Luna gets in, it already turns into a very fun segment when this guy walks out of the domain claim and sees it in Kenneth Found. He's like, "Oh, fucking shit!" Like, she dumped me on Kenneth Found.
And then she gives him a ticket because he doesn't have a mask,
Yeah.
and it's so fucking annoying, like pure annoying.
Like, it's just it's such good. Like, this guy thought he could fuck with Verona doing the domain claim, and then he's ended up back here, and it's just like, eat a big bag of shit. Like, it's so funny. And it's Miles Sutton, the little alchemist guy, the guy who saved Easton's life. So now you get a 3-day civics course because you aligned yourself with people like Easton. Suck eggs.
Right. Yep. Yeah, I love that it's a 3/7 day course. It's ridiculous.
Especially because it's like the 7-day one. Luna, every time she brings it up, she's like, "Yeah, it gives you way more free time to walk around and explore the town," which is just such a shitty offer to a place that's holding you captive to do a civics course. Like, because it's like, where do I stay for those 7 days?
Yeah.
Like, it's such a piece of shit offer. I love it.
Yeah. But yeah, so I love there's this bit where Verona says to Luna, "Oh, don't forget to take off the mask before going to Kenneth above. It'll be seen as weird." And Luna thinks that's an uncomfortable idea, which is just very funny that she thinks that. But also, then you see how much she's taken this to heart later in this chapter.
Well,
It's
she's
so
like walking
adorable.
around with her hand over her face, like peering between her fingers.
Yeah,
like she's
I
just
can't wear a mask. That'll be weird. So let me scribble on some paper and hold that in front of my face instead.
It's so like, obviously we've got like Marisica walking around being our, famous nudist at the moment. And this feels like Kenneth Found's answer to the idea that, like covering your genitals is like a necessity. That's like Kenneth Found is like, also you got to cover your face. Like that's just how it's done. And like, people from other realms can be like, the fuck are you talking about? Like, just don't wear a mask. What are you like? It's so funny that seeing someone's face is like as taboo as like just walking around naked.
Yeah. It's good stuff.
Also, I love like Luna introduces herself to Verona, and obviously, it's Verona, so she starts giving her the nth degree of like questions about like how she works. And Luna's like, "Oh, my skill is like balancing," and Verona's like, "Oh, that sounds lame," which Verona doesn't need any balance in her life. But then Luna like thinks on the balance in her head. She's like, "Yeah, I guess all I can do is balance. I can balance on ceilings. I can balance on inanimate concepts." Like,
yeah,
and it's just like
doesn't dive into that enough.
Yeah, like Verona just sort of hears it, and you can assume Verona did what we did when Luna says it like that, which is okay. You can like walk on skinny objects, great. Like, who gives a shit? It's like, no, she can do all sorts of insane shit. But I just love that idea that Luna. I mean, this is the moment where Luna seals herself as a Kenneteer candidate. She completely undersells her own strengths.
Yep. Again, I think because she just normalizes, well, I can balance on stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like, she doesn't think it's weird.
She doesn't feel the need to elaborate that includes balancing on inanimate concepts, like non-physical objects. Like, she just, that's just what she's talking about, like balance. What do you mean? And yeah, of course, Verona writes that off as pointless because, mismoderation and balance over here.
Yeah.
And they have the conversation about food. I love this bit where Verona's like, "But you don't have to eat. Why are you eating?" Like, it's such a it's such a Verona / like very it's that practitioner part where Verona's like, "Why do you do this thing that is not required? That seems inefficient." Like,
yeah, it's funny, but also like we get this key moment of Luna saying, "Well, have you ever died from not eating?" And Verona's like, "No," and it's just kind of like, huh, like it's very it is funny on one hand, but also it's just very cleverly breaking down the the things that we see about the others that makes them seem other, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, exactly. It's this thing that we've been talking about to death in this episode, which is like the challenging of like what you consider normal. Like Verona considers eating as something that she does because she has to.
Mm.
And and it's the same. Like Luna's like, well, don't you like change your clothes and you just want to change things up and keep things fresh? And this is Verona. Literally, the first thing we learned about her in 1.1 is she was constantly wearing the same clothes over and over again. Was really mad that they were getting too small because she's gonna have to change shit. So Verona's like, no, I don't want to change my clothes. I don't want to eat. I have to. And Luna's like, but that's like the whole point of life is you want to keep it fresh and like have fun with it.
Mm.
Um, like it's just such a fun conversation.
Yeah, yeah, very very fun stuff.
Um,
Yeah, loved it. Great stuff.
in fact, sorry, as we reach the end, like of this segment with Luna, we haven't actually really just talked about how fucking cool Luna is as a person. Like, I guess we've been talking about how great Kenneth Found is, and she is our like epitome example of someone of Kenneth Found. Like, so there's a lot of overlap, but it's just like Luna is just such a nice. She's so friendly. She just wants to hang out and meet people and help everyone. Like, she's just the best person in the world. And I was so upset when Easton started to bind her later on. Like, how fucking dare you? Like, she doesn't have to go to school, but she just like pursues her own education via TV, which is that very like not capitalist world of like you don't have to do this. It's just like she wants to, so she does.
Yeah.
Luna's literally the greatest.
Yeah, no, she's very fun. I'm glad Wildbow gave us a POV from her and just kind of let it be very chill and fun.
Yeah, yeah.
um, Alas, we leave the chill and fun Luna here to next join Bitter Street Witch, who is a baby that gets made into a witch, not as old as she looks, but still a little old, and she's studying with Nicolette over Zoom.
Yeah, this came up I think in the chat a couple of weeks ago after one of our episodes, or maybe during it, that like I do keep defaulting to the Bitter Street Witch as being an old lady in my head, even though
Yes, me too.
I know that we've been told she isn't. But then when I picture her, she's got like scraggly grey hair and is old. Like I don't know what it is, but like even though I knew she wasn't, I couldn't help but picture her that way. And I feel like part of this interlude is really sort of settling in that like this is a thing that everyone else does to her too. Like this is her problem essentially.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean it's her archetype is to kind of be confused for an old woman, which I think is very fun.
yeah, and like this is what's made her so bitter. But before we get there, like this, I love this focus on like spirits because obviously we've got like our trio of births or conceptions, I guess. Yeah, and we'll talk about the last one that's hilarious in a bit, but um, eh, like it's just so fun to see them in action because again, I think like the Luna Hair one, I don't think we really learn much new lore here. Like we all sort of knew this was how Ken below formed, but it's just so cool to see it described and to like see it in action.
Mm, yeah, yeah, yeah. It is. It's we'll talk about this when we get to the third one. I think I have a lot that I want to say about it, but let's
Yeah,
wait for
yeah.
the third one.
I guess like I don't know. It's just so fun to compare what conception looks like in each of these three places. I'll save it for there too, actually. But yeah, um, yeah, just like it's just this is such a change of pace from Luna's like fun, happy time interlude to just like a very bitter POV.
Yeah. Um, we get another reference to Stu Mullen, a big and tough man, made far tougher. Still no interlude. Come on, Wildbow.
Okay, I
Um,
see. You've got the quote here in the script. I don't think that's talking about Stu Mullen. I think that's talking about the vice principal's steed.
I actually thought it might be talking about the foreman for a bit, but it's placed between talking about the vice principal and talking about the Bitter Street Witch, right? So there's no way it's talking about the VP's steed. That would be wild.
Yeah, the family man is another potential one, but the thing that makes me think it can't be Stu Mullen is it says creates a man that is drawn out to many times the size he should be. I'm pretty sure Stu Mullen's just like dude sized.
Yeah,
Like
true.
he's a big dude, but the only person I can think of who is drawn out to many times the size he should be is the vice principal Steed.
No, it can't be the vice principal steed because the very next sentence says the space reserved for the child riding on an on. Oh no, maybe
Yeah,
you're
like
right. No, yeah,
that's the
okay.
point.
Oh
Like
yeah, okay.
it
It's the
conceptually
steed.
goes from here's the
All right.
steed
It's a
and then
steed.
here's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
rider.
All right.
Yeah.
Damn. Well, give us a Stu
So
Mullen interlude anyway. Am I right?
yeah, no. This is tangential from your main point, which is that you want a Stu Mullen interlude.
Yes. The other interesting thing, the big part of this that I think is really interesting is the Bitter Street, which is quite complicated feelings towards the rest of the Belangers, right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of distilled by Nicolette as like wanting a fix, but I would say it's like I suppose a jealousy, or especially for Gillian, or like a longing for not having been born into the circumstances that she's been born into, right? Like she wants
Yeah.
to have a support network. She wants to not have to fight to protect herself. She wants to not be such a crone, you know what I mean? Like she clearly is unhappy with the situation she's been born into. And I think it's leading us towards her ditching Kenneth, right? Bitter Street,
Oh
which has
yeah.
talked about that a few times. I think it's probably going to happen.
Yeah. After this interlude, it feels like she'd be crazy to continue trying to stay here. Um, but no, you're right. It's this real like tragic thing. I think that the bit that really got me was like her intense jealousy when Jillian comes on screen, and
Yeah.
like she, because you know the thing with Jillian pops on, and that's when the Bitter Street Witch reacts so kind of palpably that Nicolette just instinctively is like, I'm going to another room now on her end. Like she
Yeah.
sees the Bitter Street Witch see Jillian and is
It's
like,
a
I
very
need
strong
to,
reaction. Yeah.
yeah. And like the Bitter Street Witch doesn't quite process that, but like that's clearly what happens. And it's like, you know, the fact that it's like, it's not Tanner seeing her that upsets her. It's someone like Jillian who's going to like look down or
Judge
on
her.
her or pity her or
Yeah.
like that's the person she wishes she could have been. It's just, it hurts you. Like it's such a tragic existence to be born with this like physical deformity that's getting worse, and just like it's such an understandable hatred of people who have it, who are born without this problem. Um,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like I think the tragedy of the Bitter Street Witch is that she can't get let go of her current life at the same time. Like this taps into what you were just talking about, but like like you know the Bitter Street Witch, when she finally tells Nicolette about this problem, she's like, she explains, you know, I want to take apart Jillian and steal her life and, you know, leave her
Yeah.
bloody and bent. And then she thinks at the end, and then with Jillian's life, I'd go to university and I'd marry someone beautiful and I'd have this great life with some kids and a good
Mm.
family.
Mm.
But she doesn't say that part because she's stuck in her Undercity vibes and she wants to leave Nicolette with the thoughts of like bloody pulp and
Yeah, exactly. That she's a
like not hope.
badass, not vulnerable.
Yeah. Like, you know, um, this isn't the part that has the Verona header because it's the Undercity, so it's got the Violent Lucy one, but it's a very similar vibe to me of the Bitter Street Witch like knows what the problem is and knows what she wants, but the only reason she has any power or the ability to even talk to people like Nicolette to get it is because she rose as a warlord here, and so she's really struggling to move
Yeah.
past that thinking of like the only reason she has this chance is because she's the warlord. Of course, she's not just willing to be like, oh, well, no warlording for me. Like she's had to fight for everything she's got, and of course, she still thinks like this.
Yeah. I mean, she's in a really rough situation, right? She has to abandon her font of power to get what she wants, and maybe being Nicolette's apprentice is enough of a tether to keep her afloat. But I
Yeah,
don't think she trusts that yet. She needs to kind of get a bit further along there.
Yeah, exactly. And she had to be this heartless person to get in the position to get that tether to
Yeah,
Nicolette. So
yeah,
like
yeah,
she's been rewarded for doing this. Of course she's not going to let it go like that. Um
yeah,
yeah, it's just such a tragic but so understandable position she's found herself in. Like this is
yeah,
exactly what I would
100%.
be like if I was the Bitter Street Witch. Um On a lighter note, she's kept this Technomancy laptop that I fucking love. The laptop that actually listens when you yell at it. What a dream that is.
Yeah,
Like,
it's good shit.
it actually responds to percussive maintenance. I love it.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, the witch does another reading, getting some important and actionable information. She springs into action, bringing Matthew with her.
Yeah, and seeing these predictions is really sort of fun. The second, like, this is one of those segments where getting to read these chapters twice for the podcast is very rewarding because you see her doing the
Yeah,
predictions and we know what they're going to be. So you start to be like, oh, this is the part that's predicting like Matthew, and this is the part that's predicting the fight with Luna Hair. Like, I don't know. I really enjoy getting to read segments like this twice and actually sort of understanding, oh, this is coming up because it's hinting at this prophecy.
yeah, yeah. It's you're right. It's great. This prediction stuff is very fun. Trying to like pass it out. I feel like we'll have to go do a full reread of every single, uh, time that something was predicted in the story and try and kind of make sure that we fully understand it. Like all the predictions that we had on the chapter with the wall, where we couldn't really
Yeah.
pass out a few things, and now it seems like it's coming together. But um, and we know what it all meant. It was kind of Charles's plan and all this stuff. But like, yeah, we got to go back through and make sure we understand all the predictions in retrospect.
Yeah, it's just tricky because even these ones, sort of knowing what they are, it's a bit like it's like this variation on tarot stuff because there's like a blood card. I'm pretty sure tarot doesn't have a blood card, and
Mm,
they use the lantern because I did initially try to sit down and see if I could pass out all the tarot-y stuff that was happening in this chapter. There's no lantern card. There is a hermit card, but the hermit card later gets referenced. So at first I was like, oh, the Bitter Street Witch just calls the hermit the lantern because there's a lantern in the picture on the card. That
mm.
makes sense. That fits in with her whole like natural talent vibe. Like she's explaining what the card's name is. But then she calls another thing the hermit later. So I was like, okay, well now I just don't know what the lantern is.
Yeah.
Um
Um,
yeah, no, sorry, I guess Wobble, I get that there's a separate set of decks clearly, but now I'm just sitting here like, but I don't know what any of them like. I don't know what the
what any
limits
of
on that
them
deck
mean?
are.
Yeah,
Like, we need an
it's
extra
interpretive.
material outlining the whole deck.
Um,
Um,
but
yeah.
yeah, so the thing that one of the things that BSW has predicted here is that Matthew is going to be forced to accept Edith as his familiar, therefore fulfilling uh, the promise that Marcy made to Edith to reunite them. So that's pretty gross.
Remember last week when we said, "Hey, Charles and Marcy seem to have gotten what they wanted. I wonder if Edith will get what she wanted."
Mm.
Ah, I
Uh
wish we hadn't
oh.
said that.
Yeah, it's
we
pretty
did
rough.
we help the prophecy come to pass?
Mm.
I mean, this is so fun as a development in a like reader way, like because it's. I mean, the other thing we see in this chapter is Matt lets out the doom at the end of this chapter, and it's shit now. Like he's kind of used it all up,
Mm.
and we've been talking about this since arc like 12, I think, of like Matt will have to replace the doom as it starts to die down. And now I'm sort of realizing, oh, the reason there hasn't really been a conversation about what he replaces it with is because the answer might just have to be he needs to tie himself to Edith to shore up that part of him.
Yeah.
And this is so great because like the whole thing, the reason like if you remember Edith's interlude, the only thing Edith wanted in the whole world was to like fill up the holes in Matthew and complete him, but she can't because she accidentally promised not to when they first met. And it's like the familiar bond is such a cursed version of that for her, like because up until now it's been her doom. Now it'll
Mm,
more directly be her kind of feeding the doom directly, I assume.
yeah.
But that's such a hollow
Gosh.
version of what she wanted. It's like it's so
Yeah,
shit on both ends, and
it's a
she's still
real
gonna
lose
do it.
lose situation. I think
It's
I gotta say, Edith, you're
you
gonna be
suck.
better off if you just leave. I gotta say,
I mean, everyone's fucking told her. Like,
and she just refuses to listen.
this is yeah. I mean, this is great. Like, especially viewing like the whole Edith as the reflection of Avery gone wrong. Like, this is such a nightmare scenario. An early story Avery could have potentially ended up in.
Mm,
I can't wait to see more of all of like I can't wait to see how Charles is doing, how Marcy's doing. Like the culprits as they're coming back into the story are really slotting into their bad version of Kenneteer analogs in such an interesting way.
yeah, yeah. Um, so the other thing here is we're stumbling across Luna who has been captured, which is rough, and it's obviously great they free her. But then there's this talk about a kind of secret way to avoid the writs that Luna knows about, that Matthew and BSW also know about, uh, that they're at risk of the invading practitioners finding out about, which is obviously not good for when Musa comes back to town.
Yeah, that was an interesting wrinkle. That there, yeah, you're right. There seemingly is a way around it. Part of me wonders, like we did hear, right, that one of the ways around it is if you say you're going to buy a house or something in Kennet,
Mm,
you're so like land in Kennet's pretty cheap. Like presumably someone like Musa could just like throw 50 G's onto a deposit for a house, or just say he wants to, and then he's kind of he gets to get off a bit scot free.
mm.
Um, but there's also 100 rules we don't really understand, so there could be others, but it's not good.
Yeah, and then there's this bit where um, BSW calls out that there's somebody who has a secret. Uh, or she, interestingly, she says at the start of this section, maybe I can use the secret, or the kind of the I can't remember the exact wording. She's something about the secret. And then again later, he was the one with the secret. But she doesn't seem to know what the secret is. She just seems to know there
No.
is a secret. She asks Matt, "Hey, do you know anything about this dude?" And he's like, "No." And then she's like, "That's not it then." It's this very strange. I don't know exactly what's going on here.
Oh, I thought it was it's Easton she's talking about. I'm pretty sure it's that he
Ah,
betrayed the
so
Grobards.
interesting. Interesting.
Because we get confirmation in the next segment that they got sent to Kennet Found, and we know that that was the dumb bullshit Easton was trying to pull before.
Yeah, but then
So I assume it's that he dobbed on the Grobards and got them pulled back in.
I see. So this is a secret. My initial read on it was that it was the BSW being like, "There's a secret that we should find out because it's going to cause bad things to us." But maybe it's an avenue that we can use, which definitely is true.
Yeah,
If they find out that Easton is behind that, it will set these two factions against each other.
yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, my understanding was that the secret is something that they could use, which is if they find out that Easton is the one who fucked over the Grobards, that's gonna really help split these two groups in half that they're already trying to split up.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so yeah, that ends the second part, and so we move into the third section, the conception of one more type of cynicism. This time, a human, Dom, who is approached by Luna and Avery to do a bit of bargaining. Um,
Yeah, the first sex scene in this story.
yeah, and like I gotta say, so one, it is very funny that Wild wrote a sperm POV, like whatever, that's hilarious, of course. But memes aside, like I actually think this
It's
might
so
be my
good.
favorite thing in this story so far, the setup of and payoff in this chapter, because it's so clever. Because the theme of this chapter is about and the theme of this entire story really is others aren't so different after all, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
and obviously we hit that beat with Luna interacting with Verona and the stuff about food and all that jazz. But then we get this bit where these first two sections start with what is essentially xenofiction, right? And intentionally to us, it feels alien. And then we get this third section, and we know that it's going to be a human citizen. We kind of have tracked that
Yeah.
as we're reading
Yeah,
it.
you go, like, you get the banners and everything. We're very much like, oh, okay, so we did Kenneth Found, then we did Kenneth
Yeah,
Below. So you come into this one and you're like, oh, this will be
this will
a
be
normal
a
human.
normal human, exactly,
And
and
so
it
then you
is.
start reading it, you're like, what the fuck is this talking about?
Yes,
And then you
and
get
then
like
it
a paragraph and you're
clicks,
like, oh, it's a sperm.
and it's
So good.
so perfect because it is so perfectly summing up. Hey, our conception is just as xenofictiony as the others. We've just kind of normalized it in our head, and so therefore, actually, humans and others, the line is so
Yeah.
thin as if to be non-existent, and it's genuinely like a perfect execution of the idea. It's so brilliant. I'm like floored by how clever it is.
Yeah, I completely agree. Just that, you know, like, because it's such a funny idea to come out like conception from this perspective of bifurcated humanity that would scream but it has no
Yes,
mouth, and like just
yes.
at that moment where you click and you're like, oh yeah, you're right.
Oh,
The
of
way that we're
course.
born is pretty
Is
fucking wacky too.
weird. It's fucking weird. And why do we have the right to see ourselves as above others? Because our weird things we've accepted, but their weird
Yeah.
things we can't
No,
accept. Like,
Ruben, our way is the more natural
yeah,
way. We
it's the
have
natural order. Like, it's obviously nonsense. And I just think this chapter does that without ever explicitly even saying it. It does it so perfectly.
But like again, I think like the other beauty in it is that it is acknowledging that each of these ways is different too. Like
Yes.
the concept isn't like equality in the sense that everything is the same. Like the
Yeah, we're
Lost
not
segment was very
identical.
different.
Yeah.
It was these scraps of unimportant shit that were made important. With the Kennet Below, it was spirits forming grooves and under pressure of flooding, basically forming new shit. And then this one is
Mm.
just some sperms whacking into an egg. And like all of those are fundamentally different, but also like on a similar level as well. Like it's somehow doing both. It's pointing out the hypocrisy of thinking that ours is any more natural or normal, while at the same time not diminishing that these places are also different.
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
different, but like still of equal validity.
Yeah. Yeah. God, it's just so clever. It's
Yeah,
just very clever, and I love it.
yeah.
So should we talk
Sorry.
about Dom?
Yeah, let's get into Dom, because Dom is great because we're finally in one of these practitioner viewpoints where he's young enough that the bullshit hasn't set in yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I particularly want to call out the first example that makes this really clear to us is one of the first things we see Dom thinking about is, oh, it's great that Massa has chosen or, taken a liking to me and this is good for me and my family. I'm really excited about that. But honestly, my favorite thing that I've ever done was go to school. And I wish I could go back to school with my friends Talia, Georgia, and Effie. And Effie's Talia's familiar. So, like, she gets last billing, admittedly, but
Mm.
I can't see many of the 16-year-old practitioners being like, oh, and I get to hang out with my friends Ulysses and Eloise and Shartsmoogle. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
he's young enough that he's treating Effie as a person still, and he's
Yes.
listing her as one of the others. And yet, like,
So
there's
good.
like this ominous first bit of, oh yeah, Master has chosen me and this is great, but he's still young enough that like he's naturally seeing Effie as a person. I'm like, oh god, can we hold on to this? Like he's so precious.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. That's such an important note. I think it's wonderful. So of course the offer that Avery has here is basically, I want to help people get out of here. I think I found a way to do it safely. You want to come with? I'll take as many as I can, but I suspect some aren't going to want to come.
I think what's really funny is Avery's not necessarily asking them to turn on each other. She's like, look, I'll take you all, but I'm only taking the ones who aren't going to be a fucking problem.
Yeah.
So, like, it's up to you guys. She's incentivizing the good ones to turn on the
To,
bad ones, which
or
is,
yeah, or to call them out or to keep them in line in like,
yeah.
yeah, she's incentivizing the good ones to uplift the terrible shittier
Yeah.
practitioners. It's great.
Well, and this again, like, this is what Arc 17 was constantly talking about. We talked to Death in Arc 17 about, like, if you have lax standards for who you ally yourself with, it comes back to bite you. And, like,
Hmm.
Kenneth was trying to do better. Mus's organization noticeably wasn't. And this is Avery finding a way to incentivize people to do it the Kenneth way of picking
Yep.
allies who are actually good. She's finding a way to break this system by making it the smart, successful thing to actually have those standards.
Mm.
Um, yeah, it's such a great idea. It's a very Kenneth found approach. Like, this is the Kenneth found thing. It's like, hey, we'll take all the people who aren't dicks. Don't be a wang bag, and I'll help you out.
Yeah.
Also, sorry, this is Avery's plan to get everyone out. So that means it's a path, right? Like, is she about to lead fucking a field trip on the paths with, like, these 30 practitioners? Because I'm fucking down for that.
God knows. Like, I can't even imagine. I'm assuming it's got to be that. It's got to be taking them along the FRT or something. Like,
No,
what
it'll be
else would
that
it be?
the go-to travel one seems to be the one with the light bars.
Oh
I
yeah,
forget the name
true.
of it, but, like, the
Yeah,
traveling light one.
yeah.
Um, like, that's where she dumped Matt and Elizabeth,
And
so she can
Liz,
use
yeah,
Elizabeth as a helper. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, I just that's just what a wild fucking idea for Avery to be like really misfrizzling it up and being like, okay, everybody, we're doing this.
Yeah.
Buckle the fuck up.
And what it's going to be is like if they're, if America's there or whatever and causes a problem, everybody's just going to be like, all right, see ya. Like, have a good time.
Yeah, exactly. I hope that she's prepared for the situation where someone's like a problem, just like drop them in the watched way and be like, I'll come
Yeah.
back for you later.
See you later.
Be good.
Give them a kick
Uh,
through into a different path. Yeah.
yeah, this is such a fun, like, teaser for where we're going with the whole we have 60 potentially hostile practitioners. It's like she's incentivizing them to have a civil war. We're going to
I
get the
love
good
it.
ones out here.
I love that you refer to it as misfrizzling them because that's totally what it is, and it's very fun.
Yeah, but this is even getting them out now has turned into a fun adventure because it's going to be a
Yeah.
trip on the paths with a bunch of grumps. Um, and then, yeah, and, like, also presumably if the shitty ones get left behind, I'm almost more excited for the story of, like, the 30 shitty war mages getting trounced by Kenneth Found and the rest of Kenneth than I am in, I'm glad that the good ones are going to get out and that we can just deal with, like, America and her other shitbags like Easton, and it's just like, okay, you guys sit in this civics course, please.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
want to see America get the civics course.
um, but yeah, that's the end of our chapters for this week. But remember, we have a discussion question that we're running at the moment. Which foundling or other character who got a one-line description would you read a whole story about? And what do you think that story would be? Now, Stu Mullen obviously is a good answer. Um,
Luna Hair
but
is definitely no longer an
yeah,
answer.
Luna Hair's off the table. Sorry, but yeah, leave your answers to that discussion question in our discussion thread, which we will link in the show notes down below.
Yeah, and remember, it says foundling or other character, so also
Mm-hmm.
even Charles's Horror's a fair game. If you want the Dryden
Mm-hmm.
story, like I do, that's a valid answer now.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, leave those answers in. Also, I think this was after our previous episode, so just a quick reminder: the fan art contest results are out, so you can go to doofmedia.com and view all the beautiful pictures slash sculptures that were submitted and see how they went.
Yeah,
And
there's some great.
it was a very competitive crop. This might have been the most competitive one we've run.
It was wonderful. I'm looking forward to. I always look forward to these fan art contests, and I think this was a very successful one. So, well done, everybody who submitted a piece.
I also
Um,
just on the side, I love that we've now reached the point. So we had this open to every Wild Bow story, and we got mostly just Pact and Pale related. It was all Otherverse related essentially.
yep.
Whereas I remember when this show was 3 months old, we ran our first one. It's like you can submit anything, and I think we got like 5 Parahumans ones and like 2 or 3 Otherverse ones. And I'm so glad that as Pale has just soared constantly, that the Otherverse is now like entering all the fan artists' hearts.
Yeah. it was a Reddit thread. I can't remember exactly what the thread was about, but we were talking about on parahumans, and somebody was talking about they mentioned Pale as Wildbow's most underappreciated work, and I remember we definitely thought that was true back at the time we started doing
Sorry,
DP
Pale or
Pack.
Pact?
Sorry, Pact.
So yeah.
And I was like, I actually don't think that's true anymore.
No, I think that's Twig now. Yeah.
And I'm just like, I mean, sorry to the Twig heads out there, but it makes me very happy that people love Pacts and Pale so much because I just love them so deeply.
I agree. That said, though, yeah, we're getting a lot of justice for Twigs in the chat, and I do agree.
Justice for Twig. Justice for Twig. Twig is very fun.
Yeah. If we weren't neck deep in Pale right now, I would be on the campaign for justice for Twig. I just don't have the bandwidth right now.
Yeah, and I've read part of Twig, and it is so fun. It's very good. It is very good, but
yeah,
otherwise forever.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%.
So yes, if you want to, I don't know, check out other shows on the Duff Media Network, I suppose you can go to duffmedia.com and see all the great shows there. There's all kinds of cool stuff there, including the fan art contest results, which you can see there now.
Yeah, and don't forget we have a Twitter at Power Reflect Cast. We've been posting memes every day there. This week we've had a theme. We're tying into what Pale in Comparison is talking about. So if you're not following Pale in Comparison, you won't understand that reference. But there's no spoilers. Don't worry.
Yep, but there are delightful memes each and every day without fail. So check out our Twitter at Pale Reflect Cast for that. If you want to support some of the shows like Pale in Comparison or The View from Halfway Down or any of the great shows on the Duff Media Network, you can become a patron. Go to patreon.com/duffmedia and you'll get access to all kinds of bonus shows like our upcoming Men in Black episodes of The High Ground, which I'm sure will be coming soon.
Yes, I've seen that chat on Facebook between you and my sister already. Don't forget to stop by Wildbow's Patreon, patreon.com/Wildbow. He's our founder. We're his foundlings. Pay him his, I don't know, memo taxes.
Yeah. Or you'll get a writ. And with that, I think it's the end of the show. So bye, everybody.
See you next week.